live as well on YouTube, so I think we're good to start, Chair.
Yeah. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Hackney's Planning Committee. My name is Councillor Katie Hanson. I'm the Vice Chair of the committee and I will be chairing this evening's meeting. The Council will be recording this meeting. Proceedings are also being live streamed on YouTube. We will be undertaking the meeting in as close a fashion as we can to our normal format for these meetings. The virtual meeting technology has a chat function. Please only use this function to raise technology related issues. I will not be monitoring the chat. The technical staff are monitoring the chat. When your camera is turned on during the meeting, please ensure that you're visible. Participants who have registered their interest to speak in the meeting should only speak when invited to do so by the chair, that's me. If any person deliberately disrupts the meeting, they will be issued with 2 verbal warnings. If they persist in disrupting the meeting, they will be removed from the remote meeting and will not be readmitted. In the event of an internet outage, the meeting will be adjourned while the technical issues are addressed. Any committee members who are unable to participate fully in an agenda item on account of interruption will be unable to vote on that matter. Could I please ask the committee members to introduce themselves? I'll start with Councillor Stopps. You're on mute, Vincent.
Well spotted. Councillor Stopps.
Councillor Rose.
Hi, Councillor Steve Race, Hoxmead and Shoreditch.
Councillor Levy.
Good evening, Councillor Michael Levy, Springfield Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Lynch. You're on mute.
Apologies, Chair. Good evening, everybody. My name's Councillor Anna Lynch, and I'm also Councillor in Homerton Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Good evening. I'm Brian Bell, Councillor for Brunswood Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Chowan.
Good evening. I'm Councillor AJ Jahan, Haggerston Ward.
And Councillor Snell.
Councillor Snell, Dalston Ward.
Thank you very much. With us, we also have a number of council officers, including the Head of Planning, Natalie Broughton. We have our Legal Advisor, Christine Stevenson, the Governance Service Officer, Gareth Sykes, who some of you may have spoken to in preparation for this meeting. There are other officers who are planning, design and transport officers present to advise us, and they will introduce themselves when they speak on the various items. Before moving to the agenda, can I please take a couple of minutes to explain how the meeting will proceed? We will hear each application summarised by the officers, a 5-minute statement from any objectors, followed by a 5-minute statement from the applicant. Members will then be free to ask questions, and the questions can be to our officers or to the applicant or to any objectors. It's my role as chair to make sure members have all the information they need to make a decision. Objectors and applicants have their say, and that the meeting runs properly. I will not be taking any contributions from the floor. This is a meeting in public, not a public meeting. You must have given notice to the Governance Services Officer before the meeting if you wish to speak. Objectors and applicants will have strictly 5 minutes each. If there is more than one speaker, you need to decide amongst yourself. Hello? You need to decide amongst yourselves how you will split the 5 minutes. Members are not representing either their wards or their political parties. We make our decisions on the basis of any site visits we may have made, what we have read in the reports, and of course what we hear this evening. We must only take account of policies adopted by this council, other material planning policies and material planning considerations. Can I emphasise that members cannot discuss nor take account of non-material matters? Members making the decision should not have allowed themselves to prejudge any application prior to the meeting. Similarly, if they have any interest in the application site or the people involved, they will declare that interest and may remove themselves from the decision. When we have finished our deliberations, we will vote on the recommendation. I will describe the voting procedure before we vote. When the decision is made, that is the end of the matter for this committee. The applicant may appeal our decision to the Secretary of State. Objectors may seek legal redress. I would advise you to seek professional advice in either case. So could we now please move to the agenda? Item 1 is apologies for absence, and I know we have some. Gareth, could you read those for me, please?
Chair, far be it for me to sort of disrupt the flow of the agenda item, and I just wanted to note that the applicant for the final agenda item 7 has just joined us.
That's good.
I'm going to assume that he can hear us okay. But we'll proceed anyway. So yes, for the agenda item 1, for apologies, I have Councillor Potter, Councillor Joseph, and I believe Councillor Stobbs has joined us, but will be leaving the meeting.
Hi, that's my understanding. So I'm going to move to declarations of interest and call on Councillor Stobbs first.
Yes, just to say, your first substantive item, the school. My wife is present this evening. She's a school governor, so I'll be leaving for that item. For the reasons of that item, I will just stay for the minutes because I presided over the meeting, so I'll just tell you my view of the minutes. And as the other 2 are so a discharge of conditions, I think I'll just stay out of your way and leave you to it this evening. There's plenty of members, so I don't think there's any fear of quorum, etc., being an issue. So yes, I'll be here and gone very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, that's very helpful. On other declarations of interest, I need to declare that I know both Rita Krishna and Pat Quigley, but there is no prejudicial interest or pecuniary, so I do not propose to leave the meeting. Do other members wish to declare any interests?
Well, Vicky, then I know Rita as well from my days as member of the council, but again, no pecuniary interest.
Thank you.
Kate, sorry.
Go ahead.
Can I'm just saying that I don't know if it's relevant, but I'm a teacher and also an NEU member, so I'm involved in the education sector. That might be relevant or not.
It's for you to decide whether your interest is in any way prejudicial, Councillor Chowan, but if you wish to ask advice from our legal advisor, she is present and would be able to help you.
No,
the decision is yours.
Could you just state for the record whether or not you believe it to be prejudicial, not prejudicial, sorry, pecuniary interest or not? Councillor?
I don't have any interest in the applicant, or I'm just saying that's my general occupation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Chair. Just similarly, I know Rita Krishna, but have no other interest or no interest in the application otherwise.
Thank you. Councillor Snell.
I went to Rita and Vincent's wedding, but it takes more than that to buy my vote. So I'm declaring an interest, but it's non-pecuniary, and I will be entirely independent in making my decision.
I think we're all in the same position. Councillor Bell.
Yeah, the same. Obviously, I know Rita for a long time, but do not feel prevent me making an impartial decision tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Lynch.
2 declarations of interest, just for the record. Firstly, obviously, I know Rita Krishna, and I'm associated to Pat Quigley due to membership of an external group. And secondly, just in relation to the minutes for the Wednesday, the 20th of January, whilst I have no reason to declare an interest, I am related to the applicants of the project that was discussed during that meeting. But I don't get any money from any of his projects, so.
Okay, is that all the declarations of interest, please? Could you lower your hands then? On your electronic hands, I mean. Marvellous. Thank you very much. So we turn to these very minutes of the 20th of January. Councillor Stobbs was in the chair. Does anyone wish to propose any corrections to these minutes? Councillor Stobbs.
Councillor Stobbs, your microphone is on mute.
Oh, apologies. Yes, so no observations. I saw the minutes before they were published and they're fine by me. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Does anyone else wish to say anything about these minutes? If not, I will sign them and I will inquire of Gareth how we do that remotely.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So we have to consider any proposals or questions that have been referred to us by the monitoring officer, but there are no such proposals or questions. So with no further ado, we will move on to item 5, New Regent's College. And I understand the planning case officer is Claire Moore, who's going to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. I will just present.
Sorry, before we start the meeting, Gareth, can you just confirm that Councillor Stops has left the meeting, please? Thank you. Gareth, you're on mute. Could you unmute, please? Thank you.
I think the recurring theme this evening. I am looking on my screen and I do not see Councillor Stobbs present. And I also believe he actually announced goodbye before he left the meeting. And I am getting nods of approval.
Not in the list of participants, so yeah. In my opinion, he has left. But thank you for clarifying that.
Yep. Thank you, Christine, for reminding me.
So let's note that for the minutes as good housekeeping, and we'll move on to Claire's introduction.
Thank you, Chair. I will just share my screen. Are you able to see the slide? Brilliant. So this site is a school site at 28 Ickper Road. This is just the red line boundary of the site. It was the former New Regent's College. And these are some aerial views of the site. So I'll just talk you through this a little bit. This is the view of the site from Brook Road to the south. As you can see, As you can see, there are two main buildings on the site. This one here, the large one, this is Block A, and then this block here is Block B. So the site isn't within a conservation area, although it's surrounded by Northwold and Cazenove Conservation Area, these two roads, and it does not contain locally or statutory listed buildings. It is worth to note Block B, as you'll know from the report, has been assessed as a non-designated heritage asset. The reason being this building was designed and constructed by Foster and Associates. It was a sort of prototype building, one of the first of its time in the 70s, when the government shifted from a medical treatment of children with special needs to an educational focus. So the building was designed quite uniquely for that purpose. Just to emphasize, the site is a school site. So the proposal we're looking at relates solely to the building works associated with the reinstatement of the school. And the primary works are related to cladding changes, roof alterations, the removal of porta cabins throughout the site, alterations to windows, doors, and openings. There's a new entrance lobby created, and then general landscaping works. So I'll take you through some of these photos. As you can see, this is Block A, the front elevation of it. And then this is again Block A. With this photograph that I've got my cursor on at the moment, this building here and this building here are porta cabins that are to be removed. And this sliver that you can see here, that's Block B, which is the Foster and Associates building. So the removal of these porta cabins will improve the openness and the visibility of Block B. And then we've just got the southern elevation of Block A here. And then this is the Foster and Associates Block B, which has been altered over time. And then just some more photos. Some of the landscaping works involve the removal of play equipment such as this, as it's redundant with the new age group moving into the school. So then this is just a comparison of existing and proposed site plans. As you can see, the existing site has these various porta cabins or temporary structures throughout that will be removed, creating a less cluttered appearance across the site. Additionally, there will be 10 Sheffield bike stands constructed and then 2 accessible parking spaces. And this location here is where the new glazed entrance lobby will be going. And then just some existing and proposed floor plans of Block A. And then the roof plans. So there are changes to the roofscape of Block A, but you will notice when I show you the elevational treatments that they don't impact the massing of the building. And then Block B. Notably, because we've assessed this as a non-designated heritage asset, we've looked at the alterations to the original Foster and Associates fabric, and these 3 roof lights are actually the only alterations to that fabric. So we've assessed that, and accordingly, because they're so minor, they're not invasive, and they won't be visible, we've decided that those would be acceptable. And then some elevations of Block A. To point out, there is timber cladding proposed. We were initially concerned about that, as were the Conservation Area Advisory Committee. However, the applicant has provided us with samples that have reassured us that this would be an appropriate treatment. And then we have also recommended a condition regarding the weather treatment of this cladding. And then just the southern elevation of Block A, and east and west. And then Block B. So this application has been presented to the planning subcommittee tonight, as this is a council application. We initially received an objection from the Conservation Area Advisory Committee in regards to the heritage status of Block B. There was a thought that it was a locally listed building. However, we've since clarified that that is not the case. Irrespective of that, we have then assessed the building as it were a locally listed building. We've assessed the impact on the heritage fabric and consider it to be acceptable. And then the other objection that was received was from a residential property along the northern boundary, concerned about privacy impacts from the glazed entrance lobby. We've assessed this in the report and concluded that the impact would be acceptable. And lastly, just to cover off the addendum that you've hopefully received, the first matter is that the new London plan was published yesterday. So the policies as they're applied to this proposal have not substantially changed in their wording or their intent. And so the assessment before you remains true to those policies. So we have replaced this now superseded 2016 policies with the now published 2021 policies. And then lastly, in the addendum, the other matter is bin storage. So this has been reviewed by our waste and recycling team, and they consider that the storage location is sufficient, and we've specified the volumes of bin storage that will be required to service this new school. So based on the assessment that we've put in front of you, we recommend that this application be approved subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I understand we have the Education Property Advisor, Ginevra Davis, who is going to introduce the architect as well. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yes, over to you then, please.
Thank you. Okay, so hi, I'm Ginevra Davis. I'm the client project manager from Hackney's Education Property Department for the school. Just a brief background, really. This site has been in special educational needs use since 1970, I think, as Claire has alluded to in her report, and we're keen to keep the site in education use. We've received funding under a government grant to expand much needed places for the special educational needs students in the borough. That, together with funding from the school, has given us the opportunity to refurbish the site to be used as an expansion to the Garden School, which is a special school in Hackney for learners with autism. And this will retain the site for special educational needs in the borough. Gollifer Langston Architects, who've designed the scheme, will present in a minute. They've taken a really strong interest, I think, in the history of the building, it's fair to say, and are focused on using what is actually a tight budget to try to reverse the ad hoc and disjointed development of the site to present a more coherent design proposal for the new occupants. So I think that's all I really wanted to say. I'll hand over to Andy now to summarise the proposals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ginevra, Chair, and thank you, Claire. I think you've really covered a lot of the general points, so I don't want to repeat those. I think we just want to sort of explain generally that we're working with quite a limited budget here, and we're really not able to perhaps go as far as we would like. So we've strategically worked to try and address condition. Both buildings are in poor condition now, I think it's fair to say. And we also have a series of ad hoc additions that have been added over the past 20 years. And to some extent, this exercise is more about trying to take away and pare back to the original character of both buildings. And they're actually quite different buildings. The Ilya building, Block A, being a sort of brick and plywood building, the Norman Foster building, steel frame, and what was originally a very elegant, streamlined facade on both sides, which has been completely removed apart from just the top section. A very, very sad event, and we'd love to be able to return that to its former glory. But with our limited means, we're going to try and keep what we have and restore what we can and address some of those crucial issues like the end of life of the roof finish of both buildings, the fact that the fascias are now rotting on Block A. Those are the kinds of things which we're really facing. And here we are, we're accommodating the garden school and trying to just remodel internally in a very limited fashion. But what we aim to do, and I hope it comes through in the heritage statement which we gave you, we're trying to really just deal with both buildings in a sensitive manner, and hopefully they will have some of their original character restored.
Thank you, that's great. We do have with us a consultant who was formerly the head teacher of the school and the chair of governors of the school, but they've indicated that they are happy to answer questions but weren't seeking to address the committee. So I will move to questions from members of the committee, please, if there are any. If no one wants to kick off, I will. Oh, sorry, Councillor Chowan, you go first. Go ahead then.
Yeah, just two questions. They might be a bit basic, but in Hackney, all the residential properties are trying to move wood from their cladding. So why are you putting it onto your building? That's the first question. The second question is, the waste compartment, you've got a new timber bin enclosure. Is that fire resistant? Has it been painted so it's fire resistant to vandalism?
I think in both cases, well, in the case of the cladding of the building, we have a very small area of timber cladding, and the original building had timber and this is Block A, it had timber and plywood as one of its main materials, if you like. So we've looked closely at that, and we thought that in those limited areas, and with the kind of modern oil-based finishes that you can apply to timber, we think that we have a good solution and one that fits well with the building. And it's part of keeping the two buildings looking different, which will enhance both in a way. So I think you have probably got a good longevity through those materials, which is what you'd be looking for.
Would that, just a quick supplementary, if you had aluminium there instead of wood, would that reduce the insurance cost for the building?
I'm probably the wrong person to answer questions.
Well, I know that's not material to our decision, so I'm not going to actually allow that question anyway.
Thank you, Chair.
I had Councillor Snell, you go ahead.
Apologies if this is in the report and I haven't noticed it. That was a very good presentation, and I'm going to stick to planning issues. I just want to know more about the wood, because sorry, thank you for the presentation. I think it was interesting in explaining what was distinctive about Foster. I have some general concerns about the way we seem to have lost some of the quality of the original building over the years, but that is not a planning consideration. But a planning consideration is, what exactly is the wood, and what's the finish on it?
So on Block A, the 1960 building, Block A, it would be larch used as the timber cladding. But we're only talking about an area that's, the height of the building at about 4 meters long. So we're talking about a very small area. But yes, larch, and we would stain it to match the existing timber cladding of the ceilings of the building, which is one of its major characteristics. So it would all blend in both inside and out.
And this is the discussion that you had with the Conservation Area Advisory Committee, and they were reassured that it wasn't as outrageous as they first thought.
They haven't said those words, but I hope that they would be satisfied with the information we've provided.
Just to reiterate, I mean, the officer did tell us this, but although the building is not locally listed, the officers have assessed it as though it were, and my understanding is it is being considered for local listing. But it's been assessed as if it were already locally listed, so it's been already been held to a higher standard than is strictly speaking necessary, but sort of future-proofs us, which I think is a very helpful approach, actually.
Katie, sorry, on that point, I wonder if any of the design officers could comment, because it would seem to me that although we're not able to reinstate the original Foster design, then surely, in effect, in design terms, this is enhancing the site by getting rid of some of the crap that's gone in between. So would it be useful to invite a design officer just to comment on that?
I am sure Mr. Walder will be very happy to address us. Can I call him?
Thank you, Chair. It's Tim Walder, Conservation Design Officer. I do have some archive images of the building if you want to see a sea of 70s orange, but you may not have time. Yeah, I mean, what's happened is the building has its original form, and it has some of its original external cladding, but not all of it. Somebody changed the windows and the cladding lower down. A fair amount of the plan form internally survives, and all of the structure survives, and some internal details survive. So it is still very much the same building. So we assess the proposals in terms of it being a non-designated heritage asset, and it was going in the right direction, and they clearly are. I mean, I think the architect is very sympathetic and very knowledgeable about the building, which is very helpful, because when you see pictures of the building, it doesn't really look like anything special. It looks like another 70s school. It's only when you look closer that you realise that there's a different hand. It's actually by Wendy Foster, Norman Foster's first wife. It's nothing to do with Norman Foster at all, really, apart from the fact that it's his wife and business partner. There's two main changes externally: roof lights, and they're needed because it's a single aspect, and it would be quite dark towards the middle of the corridor. And there's a plan form change where an art room is introduced. But I mean, they're all necessary to the use, because the building was originally designed for relatively young children who were disabled children in the terms of 1972. These children are, as I'm sure the head teacher would elucidate, older and bigger and have slightly different needs spatially. So we were actually quite happy with the proposed changes to the building. I mean, I actually looked at it and thought, if this was a statutory nationally listed building, would we accept these changes? And I think we would. So I'm very confident that the proposed changes and the details of materials that have been provided are completely satisfactory.
Thank you very much. Does that answer your question, Councillor Snell?
As ever, Mr. Walder is on top of the job and very helpful and informative. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Well, I only had one question, which is there any chance we can remove the air conditioning units that appear in some of the photographs on the exterior of the building while we're doing our tidying up and removing crap, I think it was referred to?
Yes, indeed. That is one of the first things that will happen. So we have a sort of randomly placed condensers on the face of Block A, and we've got pipe work which has been taken over Block B, the Foster building, and through the original facade. In both cases, those units will be grouped centrally on the roof so they're less visible, and the pipe work will be concealed.
That's excellent. I apologise for using a word I shouldn't have used. Perhaps the minutes could say rubbish or something like that, or unnecessary clutter or something. I'm sure Gareth can fix it for me. Do any other members have questions? Councillor Bell?
was going to say, I think it's going to live on YouTube, so it's too late for amending the language.
That's true. Oh well, worse things happen at sea. I don't think anyone's broken the code. Do any other members have questions? If not, I will be moving us to the vote. So the recommendation is that we grant planning permission subject to conditions. What I'd like to do is ask people to hold their hands up to vote. We will have to have a roll call as well, but I'd like to try and do a hand vote first, as if we were in the town hall. So may I please see hands for those in favour? I believe that is all of us. Gareth, would you do the roll call, please?
Okay, so I'm going to go in terms of my screen, so I will go for my left. So Councillor Hanson, please.
4.
Thank you very much. Councillor Levy.
4.
Councillor Lynch.
4.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bell.
4.
Going to my second line on my screen. Councillor Snell.
4.
Thank you very much. Councillor Race.
4.
And I believe the final councillor on my list, unless I've missed somebody, which I probably haven't, Councillor Chalahan, please.
4.
Thank you very much. I believe that is all the councillors now have voted and declared their voting preference.
Yep, so that's unanimously approved. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Pat and Rita, for your attendance. You are welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but I will completely understand if you don't wish to do that. But we are grateful to you for coming. I know we didn't have any questions for you, but it was still good that you were here in case any did arise. So thank you again. I'm not proposing to call a break, given we've only been going for half an hour. I'm proposing to move us straight to the next agenda item. Is that okay?
Chair, I wonder if I could just jump in for one brief moment. I was very conscious that, he doesn't appear to be in the screen, but maybe perhaps we can speak to him once we get to item 7. But I was going to try and just quickly speak to the applicant for agenda item 7, just to double check his microphone. I see him moving.
Is that Mr. Here?
Yes. Could I just hear your microphone for a second, please, Mr. Here?
Sorry, can you just...
Can I just hear your microphone? You sound very clear.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Fantastic, very good. We'll get to you at item 7, but if you could turn your microphone off for the moment, that would be much appreciated. Thank you very much. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Good. So item 6, Worship Square. We have Barry Coughlin. I can't say your name, sorry. Is it Coughlin? To introduce it. And we have a transport officer as well. We don't have anyone registered to speak in objection. So Barry, when you're ready, please.
But Chair, sorry to interject once again, but I do believe we have the applicant here.
Aha.
I do have Ben in front of my screen.
We do. Sorry. That was on the next page of my briefing. I hadn't turned over. You're quite correct. We have Benjamin Bridbury to answer questions, and he is the development manager.
Okay.
So Barry, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just present my screen. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so this item relates to Worship Square, which is at 65 Clifton Street. The site boundary is outlined in blue. The site's bounded by Worship Street to the south and Clifton Street to the east. There's also a small area of public realm to the east known as Worship Square. This is an aerial view which shows you the site boundary in red here. You can see it's formed of 2 buildings, the existing condition, currently vacant, formerly of office use. This is the public realm area I spoke about earlier. There is a school located immediately to the west of the site. It's known as the Lyceum School. It's within this frontage here on Worship Street, and it extends to this rear building and includes the courtyard area, which is right on the site boundary, and includes some windows facing the boundary. This is an image of the existing buildings on site. As I said, it's comprised of 2 separate buildings. You can also see the area of public realm here, which has recently been completed. known as Worship Square. This is a view looking east along Worship Street. You can see the site expanse along Worship Street here, and then also the Lyceum School entrance, which is this black door immediately adjacent to the site boundary. So this is an image of the approved scheme. So the original scheme was approved in 2019. This application is to discharge the construction management plan condition attached to planning permission 2019-0462. So the original scheme is a 9-story office block. When it was heard at committee, there was objections received from the adjacent Lyceum School, and one of the reasons for their objection was the impact of construction upon the school in terms of construction, logistics, and environmental impacts. So for that reason, members asked for this condition to come back to committee, which is why you're hearing it tonight. So on the construction logistics, because of the nature of the site, where the entirety of the footprint, the entirety of the site will be excavated, delivery for construction deliveries need to happen adjacent to the site rather than on the site. So it's been deemed that the Worship Street location has been deemed as the most appropriate for servicing adjacent to the site. This is because of the area of public realm immediately to the east, so that the Worship Street location is the most appropriate. Construction vehicles would access a pit lane going east-west along Worship Street. You can see the kind of direction of travel here with vehicles accessing from the east and leaving along Worship Street. This is an image showing the extent of the pit lane. So it would involve the closure of the footway on the north of Worship Street and the suspension of parking bays. So some additional measures have been put in place since the original construction management plan was submitted. It's worth noting that the developer consulted with the adjacent school prior to their initial submission here, and took on board many of the suggestions of the school and submitted a management plan which the school didn't object to. Nevertheless, officers felt that there could be further steps taken to mitigate the potential impact of the pit lane upon the school, given the adjacency of the pit lane to the entrance to the school. So you can see how the road just curves around to the side here. That's the entrance to the Lyceum School. So the additional measures that officers have secured are a controlled crossing, which would divert pedestrian traffic to the southern side of Worship Square. There's also a restriction on delivery times at school opening and closing. Some additional measures have also been secured, including CCTV installation to assist with monitoring, and further measures in relation to the management of deliveries. The school have been contacted in relation to these enhanced measures and have confirmed that they raised no objection, and that's detailed in the addendum. Just turning briefly to the environmental mitigation measures that are proposed in the plan. So this image shows you some of the mitigation measure, the air and noise quality mitigation points. There's a wide range of mitigation measures proposed in the plan, including dust suppression and the enclosures to contain dust and noise impacts. These have been assessed by the council's specialist officers for air quality and noise pollution and are considered acceptable. But overall, the construction management plan that's been submitted is considered to be acceptable in terms of mitigating the impact of the development. And for that reason, the recommendation is to discharge the condition. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have the transport officer present. Did you want to address the committee, or would you just like to answer questions?
Hi there, Joe Croft. I'm a senior transport planner on the development control side. No, I've nothing specific to add to what Barry has outlined. The only point I would make is that we also have Jack Owen, hopefully on the call, who is our construction management and logistics monitoring officer. So it's really good to introduce you to Jack as well, because I know certainly with previous applications, but certainly this one, the added benefit and sort of safeguarding assurance of having Jack liaising with developers is I think a real kind of unique benefit. But otherwise, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, that's very helpful. I see a couple of hands. I don't know if they are legacy hands though. Councillor Snell, did you want to speak?
Sorry, that was a legacy hand. I do apologise. We don't have, can I just check? We don't have the school here, do we? I mean, I'm trying to remember when we made this original decision, and it was about concerns to the neighbours. And I just feel, to some extent, if they're not objecting now, then fine, we let it go through. But I just wanted to check that there's nobody in this meeting who can, and perhaps one of the officers can just give us an update on, you know, how they've been involved. Who were the people we were originally concerned about, and exactly what is their final say on what we've proposed tonight?
My understanding is the school is now happy, which is obviously, as you say, is a good sign. The fact that they're not here is a good sign. But perhaps the officer could comment on what the school thinks of this.
Yeah, no problem. So, yeah, they were consulted initially by the developer. So they met with them and discussed the plan they would submit. And the measures that are in the plan were informed by that discussion. So when the initial consultation happened, I contacted them to tell them about the submission. They confirmed that they had no objection. So they were originally happy with what was submitted. So what we've done is improve many of the measures within the plan. So we've gone beyond what they already thought was okay. I've contacted them again. They've reviewed it. They've acknowledged that it's an improvement, and again said they've no objection. So I think that's why there's nobody here tonight.
That's very good to hear. Thank you. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions, if you wouldn't mind. The first is just in terms of the routes in and routes out. So Joe, this may be for you. I noticed that there's a route in and route out, but it's not very extensive beyond the site. Are we asking the construction vehicles to take a particular route out and away to a kind of arterial road? And then as a sub-point to that, to the east of the site, along Worship Street, is obviously relatively well-used cycle lane that goes from the city through to Shoreditch. So I wondered what the plans were to make sure that that route was remained safe for cyclists in particular. And obviously, sorry, this is in my ward. It's not something to declare, but obviously I know the area quite well. So that was my first question. The second question is just in terms of the new public square that's only just been sort of finished by Hackney Council on Worship Square. I'm just interested to know your views about how we're going to make sure that remains a reasonably kind of good space for people to spend time in as well as the pandemic through the work, through these construction work, making sure that the construction site doesn't impact on that square as much as possible. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Race. Jack, are you on the call? Would you mind fielding Councillor Race's initial two questions?
Good evening, Jack Owen, Construction Logistics Officer. So I think the first one was with regards to the routes, and so the intention would be that that they would come in from the west and then on leaving Worship Street would head north up Curtin Road, and then onto the strategic highway, just to the north on Great Eastern Street. And the second question, second question on Worship Street, yes. So the entrance that the sort of applicant has proposed, certainly in the first phase, is to have facilities for staff on the site, and they will be accessed from Clifton Street, and they will, where necessary, be moved. But the access will be from Clifton Street north of there, and so we'll also have hoarding there, which will prevent dust and debris and mud. So also adding into the square to maintain height as existing now.
And then thanks so much for that, Jack. And then Councillor Race, just to pick up on your question about the public realm. So yeah, I think in terms of this construction phase, I believe, and Jack, correct me if I'm wrong, so this is due to finish in 2023, I think June potentially. At the moment, we're having quite detailed conversations about plans for maintaining that kind of high quality standard of public realm. But obviously conversations around the ramifications from the pandemic will be integral to those conversations. And certainly I'm more than happy to kind of keep you up to date. I was actually speaking to one of the engineers involved in sort of planning for that. But as I say, more than happy to give you sort of subsequent updates. But I think this is this has been sort of our officer focus over the last 2-3 months, just in ensuring we've got the level of safeguarding into the construction management process. And I think, as the applicant will concur, there's been an awful lot of discussion to finalise that. We can then, hypothetically, if it is approved, we can then move to the sort of public realm and worship square side of things.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Sorry, Chair, could I just come back to my first question just about the routes in and out? So I think just in terms of the cycling, if you could, Jack or Joe, if you could just put me through that. And it's basically from the Apple Street across the Worship Street, Curtain Road, a kind of turning basically. So so the construction traffic out of the site will go up Curtain Road, as you rightly said. That is, I mean, we've got the cycling infrastructure at that corner. So what is the construction? What's the construction plan have to say about that kind of cycling route?
Jack, are you able to field that question?
Yeah, I guess in terms of the sort of wider plan, I guess one of the key focus really has been, and the reason for the amendments, I guess sort of specifically on Worship Street, have been to safeguard that route for cyclists. There have been a key priority in there. There isn't any specific measures that are included there further to the east, but of course within the management plan, we would expect the applicants, and we'd have ongoing sort of dialogue with the applicants to have specific instructions with the people delivering to and from the site, and so that they are sort of making sure that they are delivering the right way and the right routes, and that all of those key areas are highlighted. Not just sort of up streets, some sort of stuff further north as well that will need to be highlighted, and that will be included within ongoing discussions with the applicant as we progress.
Okay, so I wonder, Chair, whether sorry, Joe, you're popping in there. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say extremely quickly. Obviously, the construction management plan has been deemed as satisfactory by our network managers, but a key point of why we have Jack in post doing the construction monitoring role is very much to have an ongoing discourse with developers, and I think it's absolutely a salient point that you've raised, about that cycle lane. So that's certainly something we can pursue with the developers, and just discuss that and finalise it more.
Yeah, thank you. So, thanks, Joe, and thanks, Jack. So I wondered, I mean, at this point, it might be useful to understand whether it'd be useful either for you to take away the conversation, or whether we should do something on this point now to safeguard that route, either to some banks people at the route to ensure that cyclists know that there are kind of large construction trucks coming around the corner, or is that something that we do now, Chair, or is that something that will come as part of the conversations that the officers are having?
We seek guidance from the the officers, if there's a condition we can impose about it, then we could certainly do that this evening, or we could ask for the officers to come back and sort of, perhaps for sign off by the chair and for you to have sight of it, given you as you raised the point.
I suppose, Chair, just to give a bit of context, obviously up in the north of the ward, there's quite a lot of construction going on with Britannia and with the secondary school and various others, and so we've had quite a lot of experience over the last couple of years of quite a lot of construction traffic, and obviously as Hackney is the sort of overall owner of that site, it's been relatively easy to make sure that construction traffic follows the routes it's meant to take, and it's been, as far as I can see, after a bumpy period in sort of terms of it all starting up, it has been best practice since, and it does work well. But what I wouldn't want to see is for us to allow just to sort of allow it to become quite a problem down in the south there.
No, absolutely. I can see our legal advisor indicating, so I'll call her now.
Thank you, Chair. Just really wanted to remind members that the application before us tonight is not an application for planning permission. It really is an application to discharge condition 18. So therefore, if members are not happy or feel that insufficient information has been provided to discharge that condition, then they shouldn't do so tonight, and therefore the application shouldn't be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. You are quite correct, and that was I put that badly. So if we are not satisfied on this point, we could defer discharging these conditions if we saw fit.
Yes, but we cannot sort of add a condition on top of a
Right.
condition.
No, I understand you. That's very clear. Councillor Race, are you suggesting that we might wish to defer this while we get satisfaction on that point?
Well, I'll take guidance from the chair and from the committee, I suppose. I'm the first to talk on this, and I've taken up quite a lot of time, as you all know by now. Sorry. So I suppose it'd be useful to know what the next steps might be from Joe in terms of that specific kind of question. Is this the final? You said that conversations are ongoing. I suppose the question is, will we take it as read that you'll take this on board and sort of try and add it in, or if we're not convinced that essentially the construction company would implement that, then we would want to see it back. Is that? I think that's fair. That's what Christine just said.
Can I just check? Councillor Lynch, you're indicating, is that on this point or a slightly different point?
No, it's not on this point.
Let's finish this point then, and then I'll call Councillor Lynch. So Joe and/or Jack, did you want to reply on that, on the point that Councillor Race makes?
Chair, do you mind if I just respond on that one? Just in terms of the ongoing monitoring of the condition, so there is measures within the plan that relate to cycle safety, including induction for all delivery drivers about cycle safety, and then there's the measures in relation to the immediate context of the site. So through the ongoing monitoring of the plan, and with Jackie now in position to kind of carry that out, if there is any problems identified, we do have a facility there to address them through the ongoing monitoring. So in that respect, I think we probably could cover it with what's in the plan at the moment. That's my view anyway. I'm not sure if Joe or Jack wanted to corroborate that.
Yeah, I think I would certainly just echo that. The monitoring of the condition would be certainly how we would provide the cycle safety element, and Councillor Race would certainly, would deal with that point specifically for you.
Is that sufficient assurance, Councillor Race?
It's a good question. I'm a bit to be honest. What I will say is that I'm a bit surprised that we don't cover this off in this construction management plan, to be honest, and that given those very tight streets around there, and the fact that that the exit route for construction traffic goes across a cycle lane, relatively well used one. I'm surprised that it's not within the plan, and that I don't really see that there's a plan for it other than it will be monitored, to be honest. So, Chair, to carry on with the other questions and.
Sure. So Councillor Lynch was indicating on a different point, I understand.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, I may have been slightly distracted by an urgent issue to do with my outside work. And it may have already been asked by Councillor Race. It was just more about some assurance that obviously the Health Safety Executive has done a very comprehensive report on this, but it was just in a nutshell, are we assured that this has now reflected the new ways of working following being in the pandemic, and that the plan is a live thing that will obviously respond to any further national guidance around construction working and social distancing. It was just assurance for that, really, and I think for anyone in the public would be, there's been some concern around big construction sites being able to continue at the beginning of the pandemic. So it was just some assurance there that there'll be strict rules for the staff working on there, and that whether or not the people employing those members of staff are they required to do a regular testing as well.
Councillor Lynch, while you raise an extremely good point, I'm not convinced it's a material planning consideration.
Oh, is it not? Oh, okay.
I'm looking at the head of planning, who is, I think, indicating that that's the case. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't think that's a material planning consideration. It's covered by separate legislation.
Okay.
So,
who's supportive of that? Christine?
Legal advisor, do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree with everything that Natalie's saying. It is definitely outside and can't.
I mean, I understand why you're asking, Councillor Lynch, and it's a perfectly good point. It's just that we're not allowed to give it any weight, so it's not. There's no point admitting it into the discussion. I don't see any other hands. I think on the question that Councillor Race raised, the fact that it's not sort of on the face of the construction management plan and is going to be dealt with by monitoring seems perhaps slightly suboptimal, and perhaps it's a point we can ask the officers to take into account when looking at future construction management plans. I'm not minded to suggest we defer this, however, unless other members wish to do so. So if no one is moving that we defer, I'm going to put the proposal to the vote, which is that we discharge condition 18, which is the construction management plan attached to planning permission 2019-0462. Would you please indicate by show of hands before we take a roll call? Thank you. Are there any against? Any abstentions? Councillor Race is abstaining. Gareth, do you have that, or do you wish to take a roll call?
No, apologies, Chair. I didn't quite catch it. I thought you were going to ask me to go through the council, but you've obviously now asked me. So if we could go, so I will begin with yourself, Councillor Hanson, please.
Four.
Thank you very much. I will then go to the right of my screen. Councillor Chowahan, please.
Four.
Thank you very much. Councillor Race, again for the record, please.
Abstain.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Snell, please, for the record and for my notes, your vote, please.
4.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bell, please, your vote.
4.
Thank you very much. Councillor Levy, please. Your
4.
vote. 4. Thank you. Councillor Lynch.
4.
Thank you very much. I believe that is all the councillors.
So that is carried with one abstention. Thank you very much, everyone. Again, we've only been going for an hour and we only have one more item, which is another discharge of conditions. So unless anyone wishes me to call a break, I'll just carry on. I'll carry on. Fine. Item 7, another discharge of conditions. This is time for 184 Evering Road. And I understand we do have 2 objectors who wish to speak. We have Mr. Tierney and Mr. Pimena, is that right?
Yeah.
Are you both present?
That's Renato speaking. I spoke to Joseph Tierney before, and I will start, and Joseph will finish our.
That's fine. I'll call you to speak after the officer has introduced the item. You do have 5 minutes between you, and you will need to agree between you how to divide that 5 minutes.
It's agreed already. That's fine.
Excellent. Good. In that case, I will call Gerard Livard to introduce the item, please. And he's supported by Matt Payne, who's the Urban Design Officer.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to bring the presentation up onto the screen.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, this is, I hope everybody can see that. This is an application for, again, discharge of conditions at 184 Evering Road. The substantive planning application was pardon me, was determined at the planning subcommittee, and details of various items, including windows, the refuse store and the cycle store, were requested to be brought back for consideration by the members due to perceived concerns that the refuse and bin stores would be very large and would be overbearing in the street scene and what have you. Now, if I can just show you the overall view of the proposed landscaping in the front garden. There is a cycle store which would be against the front railing, well, not the front railings, but it would be made of brick, and again a refuse store against the side boundary. Now this is the arrangement for the front garden. Again, you can see cycles, refuse. And these are the details which have been submitted, and there's quite a few on each of the drawings. So just to break those down slightly, this is the cycle store, which is suitable for accommodating the number of cycles requested. It's going to be relatively modest in height, just over 1.2 meters. And this is an example of the refuse store. It's a very similar store to ones that have been installed by the same developer at other sites. And again, that is sufficient for the number of refuse bins required. And again, that is just under 1.1 meters in height. The window details, they're timber windows, double glazed, with a 16mm profile. These are details of the front boundary railings. And these would be the railings for the light well. And that's a photograph of the railings for the light well. Now these details have been reviewed by officers. We consider that they would not be overbearing in the street scene, and the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gerard. I've been advised that we actually have Luciana covering the where it is, the urban design question rather than Matt Payne. So Luciana will be able to answer any questions unless she wishes to add anything to Gerard's report. If not, should we hear?
Here for questions. If
that's great, that's helpful. Thank you very much. So in that case, we will move to the objectors,
Okay.
who have up to 5 minutes. And I believe, Mr. Pimenta, that you're going to start?
Yep. Shall I start now?
Please.
Good evening. We have made a number of objections to the approval of the planning application for this development, which is a ruthless overdevelopment of a house into 5 flat units. Regrettably, our objections were rejected by the case officer, and the application was granted approval. The development creates 5 flats, none of which are accessible or adaptable for wheelchair users. The development also does not provide any affordable house units. Today, the committee is reviewing window details, ratings for the front light well, bike shelves, and bin storage. They are all built already. With regards to the bike sheds and bin storage, the terrace where this property sits was of a consistent architectural design and layout with large front gardens, the consistency and uniformity of the properties and their outdoor spaces was intrinsic part of the character of the area. Unfortunately, the bulk of structures erected in the front garden for bike sheds, bin storage, etc., broke this consistency. Its scale is of no precedent in the area, and large exposed surfaces made of unfinished block work, you can go there and see. With regards to the windows, the design access statement for this development stated in page 3 that external new doors and windows will be replaced by new timber grain window and doors. Now, for this discharge of conditions, the word has changed to wood grain effect window. From wood grain, we are now looking at PVC frame that fakes wood. I believe this is an unacceptable and unjustifiable change that diminishes the character and appearance of the area, whereas double glazed timber sash windows are available in the market and should be used instead. It is frustrating to see this development practically complete with at least one person living in the property, while a number of conditions are not discharged and a number of non-conformities further deteriorate the neighboring properties, amenities, and the intrinsic qualities of the conservation area where it sits in. In conclusion, we object to the overdevelopment granted planning permission and urge Hackney to review similar developments that are spreading in our neighborhood. We object to the bulk of structures erected at the front garden of the property. We object to the PVC fake wood frames proposed. We raise concerns over the occupation of the property while conditions are not discharged and non-conformances further deteriorate the neighboring amenities. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Tierney.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hello, sorry for that. I'll just carry on. Just quickly on the presentation, a few things. The drawings that were presented to you guys are not accurate. The height of the wall is not 1.2 meters, it's 1.5. There is no front rail, it's a brick wall. The photo you saw of the property light well is actually of another property. It's not dissimilar, but the photo is not of the property you're looking at. Hence, you really haven't been given any or enough information at least as to what you're deciding on tonight, which is curious because all the work's already been done. So there's that. As far as some consistency here, the developer is being quite consistent. This is the original planning approval. There's 15 points on it. The developer has got 2 rejected, is trying to get another one rejected tonight, and is in breach of 4. So he's basically in breach of, he's either in breach or trying to reject 50% of this document, which was published in November 2019. So they've had a year, over a year, to come back with plans on point 4. It was the only thing that we asked for that night, or granted that night, to be brought back. Over a year, and now he's trying to get it rejected, which I think is unreasonable. And to be frank, pretty disrespectful to the planning committee. I mean, you asked for it to be brought back specifically, and the developer is specifically trying to get it rejected. So that decision, I think that decision was made in good faith, and it wasn't unreasonable. And I'm not sure why it's trying to be rejected tonight. I think, in general, I think you've just got insufficient information to judge this, because all the information you've been given is not in keeping with the work that's been done out front. And it's, yeah, I think that's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Tierney. We do have someone here who is I understand is on behalf of the applicant, but he hasn't registered to speak. He has indicated he will answer questions from committee members. And I'm sure we will have some for him. Councillor Bell, you have unmuted yourself. Is that because you wish to answer ask a question?
Well, if someone has to start, then clearly I'm well aware that most of the points raised by the first objector are not relevant tonight. They were points determined at the earlier stage, and we can't really reopen them. We're here to consider quite a narrow point. However, I was alarmed to hear that the drawings, for example, were not necessarily representative of the actual scheme in front of us, and I would like to know from Mr. Levitt, is that actually true, as far as he knows?
I think it was the photograph as well was mentioned. Perhaps we could deal, I'd like to try and group these issues. So let's deal with accuracy of plans, drawings and photographs first then, as you've raised that point, Councillor Bell. So Gerard, do you have anything to say to the committee on that point, please?
Well, yeah, Councillor Bell is quite right that we are here to consider the narrow aspect of what is before the members. But in terms of the drawings are an accurate representation of the details that are proposed to discharge the condition. If the drawings turn out to be at variance with what has been constructed on site, then it is open for the council's enforcement department to investigate and take action if necessary. And the advice from senior officers during the current lockdown is that we do not go out on site unnecessarily. Now, in terms of the photographs that were in the presentation, I did say for the in relation to the refuse store that was an illustrative photograph of a refuse store from the same developer, and similarly the photograph of the light well was of a similar light well using the same railings, again by the same developer. And I apologise to the members if by not having stated that element, you consider that you may have been misled. There was no intention so to do.
Thank you, that's very helpful. So these are indications of the type of structure rather than saying they are of the site. I can see one of the objectors has raised a hand. Just to be clear, I can't call the objectors to speak again unless a member wishes to put a question to the objector. But if you are willing to answer questions from members, if members have any, that's appreciated. So I think we've dealt with the question of the...
I'd be happy to answer any questions.
That's very helpful, Mr. Tierney, thank you. So on the photographs, the officer has advised us that these are to illustrate the type of thing that we're talking about. They're not claiming to be photographs of the actual site. On the point about the drawing, my understanding is that the officer has advised us that this would be an enforcement issue if the drawing doesn't match what's built out. That isn't actually a matter for this committee, it's an enforcement issue. Councillor, I did see some hands. Councillor Snell, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I'm always unhappy if objectors make some comments and they don't get a chance to come back at the officer. We recognise that this is approval of a detail, not of that. We can't revisit the entire planning application. But I would welcome one of the objectors coming back on that. The other thing.
Councillor Snell, you do need to put a question to the objector, please, if you wish them to speak again.
Oh, no. Okay, so are the objectors happy that the concerns they've raised have been addressed by what Gerard has told them, which is fundamentally that if things are wrong, they will be put right through enforcement. That's what I understand the fundamental response is. And do they feel that there are some aspects of the thing as built, basically, that simply can't be addressed by enforcement? I mean, that's my main question. Am I allowed, Chair, with your permission, to ask Natalie a question about enforcement? Because I just want to be completely clear. If we're not going out inspecting sites at the moment, it feels to me as if we've got some massive backlog of enforcement that's going to be building up. And I just want to check that we have the capacity to effectively enforce any infringements once we are allowed to go out and our officers are able to get on with their jobs again.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Snell. Yeah, just to clarify, we are continuing with site visits, so our enforcement team continue to go out and investigate. So, yeah, that is still happening and has been happening throughout the pandemic. So just to give you some reassurances there.
Okay, so that's Councillor Snell's second question answered. Would either of the objectors like to respond to the first question, which is, has that answered your question about drawings and photographs?
Could I suggest I'll talk about the front, and then Renato knows a lot more about the architectural side of things. He's a trained architect. I mean, just from my point of view, I'll be very brief. It doesn't. I think, to be frank, there's a breakdown in trust and faith in the relationship between the developer and the planning department, and that has been constant throughout this whole project. So, and I think that was maybe by accidental omission, but I think there was some demonstration of, you know, some of the images and my opinion about the drawings not being representative of what is out there. The images were afterwards admitted not to be accurate, not to be of what is currently there. There is no excuse for not just taking a photograph of the work that's been done. It's completed. There are people living in the building, so I don't know why those photos weren't presented to you tonight. I'll leave it with Renato to talk about some of the other aspects of the development.
Well, if you could answer, yeah, thank you. If you could answer Councillor Swell's question, please, rather than have another general bite at the cherry.
I think I sort of did, where I think he said, does that satisfy?
Yes.
Yeah, no, it doesn't satisfy me. No.
Mr. Pimenta, did you want to respond to Councillor Snell's question?
I agree, it doesn't satisfy. First of all, let's go to the point of the proposed details. Mr. Jared said that the windows and doors are made of timber. If you look at the application, they say...
Okay, I'm going to stop you now. I'm really sorry about this. I said we would take these issues one by one, and we would first deal with drawings and photographs. I'm going to move us on to the windows in a minute.
Okay.
So, but I think it would be helpful to group the issues.
Yeah. So with regards to the drawings, they are incomplete in the specification of the exposed materials, and they don't show how exposed block work is being left there, and that's incorrect. And I would like to expand on the reasons why I've been bringing here things that are beyond the scope here is because we have not been allowed to object properly in the planning application itself, which was withdrawn several times from the committee until they managed to do that in a day that we were not available. And that's why I'm bringing this today here. I don't believe the process of approval of the planning application was fair with the objectors.
I understand your feelings about that, but the committee is only able to consider the matter before it this evening. As I was clear at the outset of the meeting, we're not allowed to consider non-material considerations. But thank you very much for your contribution. Shall we move on to windows? So my understanding is it's suggested that the specification for the windows has changed somewhere along the way to refer to wood grain effect rather than timber. So Gerard, could you tell us about the windows, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. No, it's my understanding that the windows are timber framed windows with double glazing that have sorry, I'm trying to they're timber windows that were specifically constructed on site, and the specification, I was given details of the specification of the windows. They're a type of Pilkington glass, and the standard profile of these windows is for a 24mm profile. However, the builder has done those with a 16mm profile, so they're narrower, and we think that the the details as submitted are acceptable. Now, when this application for the approval of details was originally submitted, they were proposing to have wood grain effect UPVC windows, whereas now they are proposing timber windows rather than timber effect.
Thank you. The applicant's agent, could you please tell us if that's your understanding, that the windows to be fit that have been fitted or are to be fitted are timber?
They are actually timber. This application went in, I think, just over a year ago. And Gerard's 100% correct. We initially proposed timber grain effect windows, and they were, we originally proposed timber grain effect windows. We had railings at the front. We had different types of bike stores. This actual application was put into committee several times and then withdrawn as conservation continued to change the goalposts. In the end, the cycle store that the council wanted was a brick enclosure using the front wall adjoining the pavement, and then having some sort of a sedum roof. That has been incorporated. The height of that is actually probably no more than 1.1 meters from pavement level. And to enable us to actually get the bikes in and out, we've actually dug a bit deeper on the side where you have to put the bike, so you have to wheel them down to allow the occupants to use that space properly and to be able to get the bikes in and out. But going back to your question, the windows are timber.
Okay, and could the officers please advise us? I mean, were those to be changed for, let's say, UPVC windows? That would be a breach of planning, I take it. Could you just confirm that's the case?
Yes, Chair, that would be a breach of planning, because the details that are being approved are for timber windows, and if they were replaced with UPVC windows, then it would be a breach of condition, and the local planning authority would be free to take action against that.
That's very helpful. Should we finish on windows before we move on to anything else? Are there any other further questions on windows, please? Mr. Here, your hand is up. Is that from before?
That was from before, yeah, sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, if no one's got any questions on windows, we'll move on to questions on other things, which is presumably bin store and bike store. Are there questions on those, on bin store or bike store, or both? Councillor Lynch.
This is just a question to the gentlemen that have expressed opposition to this application. Could you just remind me again of, have you you felt that the height was not the actual real life height of the bicycle or the bin store is not matching the measurements that we've been given tonight? Is that correct?
Objectors, did you want to answer that?
Yeah, I measured it from there on the road side at about 1.5 meters, roughly. I mean, it was, I did it this afternoon, but there's multiple ways you can measure it, because there's three different aspects. There's the area you put the bike in, there's the side of it, and then there's the road side of it. So I'm just measuring it from the road side. It looks high. It was measured higher than 1.2 meters. The ground is uneven. I'm sure someone came along and found a higher point that could probably reduce that down. But if you come and stand on the road, you can see it's easily the highest wall outside a house on the whole length of Evering Road from one end to the other, N16 to E5.
And what do the officers think about the height of the structure? Has a visit been undertaken?
Chair, I can advise that generally site visits are not undertaken for approval of details applications, and the advice that we should avoid unnecessary site visits during the lockdown has also been followed. I think I have been past the development, but I didn't stop to take a measurement, and as I advised the members earlier, what the members are being asked to determine is the details that are before them, rather than necessarily what has been built out on site. And if what has been built out on site is not in accordance with those details, then we are free to take enforcement action.
Thank you, that's helpful. Councillor Snell.
Whatever decision we take on this application, the minutes suggest that a site visit is taken. I mean, I can understand the developer very sensibly looking to make bike stands usable, and therefore they may well be an increased height from the inside. We're understanding this height is from the street, and therefore can we just minute that we want that checked up and the council to consider.
Councillor Snell, I believe you're essentially raising an enforcement issue. So
Yeah, right.
I think what you're proposing is that we ask the enforcement officers to look into whether there has been any breach. But that is not, in fact, a matter for this committee. It's just a sort of referral to them. Christine.
And we can't minute it. Okay, if that's what Christine has her hand up, so she'll tell it.
Our legal advisor will tell us.
Yeah, I just really want to remind members this afternoon, this evening, that if they really think that what they've heard tonight and from what they've digested from the officer's report, that there's insufficient details, then the condition will not be discharged. Okay.
Yes, you've taken the words out of my mouth, Christine, because it is for this committee to decide. And if we decide we would rather see photographs of the actual structures rather than representative photographs, it's open to us to require those before we agree to discharge the condition. And that's obviously a decision this committee can take this evening. But before we take such a decision, are there any more questions to objectors, applicants or officers, please? Councillor Lynch, is your hand still up from before?
No, Katie, Councillor, you've just basically articulated what I was going to articulate, which is that I will be open and say that at this point in time, I do not feel that I have the sufficient information to make a decision on this.
Thank you. Mr. Here has his hand up. Technically, he can only answer questions from members of the committee. And I don't. So that's right.
I was just going to clarify that I think Mr. Tierney has measured the wall maybe from the driveway. There's no uniformity in these properties, and they're very sadly mistaken in what they're saying that this is the highest wall. The property that we had in question had a garage in the basement, and there was a driveway to that garage. Now, you've got the pavement, then the pavement drops where they had the car access. So when we've made the wall, obviously we've had to make it uniform from the pavement, but where it's actually going over the driveway, where the driveway went into the garage, the wall's going to be slightly higher. So if you measure it from that point, then you're actually measuring it from the street level as opposed to pavement level. Pavement level, the wall is only max 1.2. There's a gate there that can't be more than 900 high, and there's one course of brick above that.
Thank you. That's a lot of detail, but thank you very much for that. Natalie, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to reiterate that members are considering the drawings before them tonight, so they're not considering what's on site at the moment. And if that is different to what's proposed in the drawings, then we will, of course, look into kind of the enforcement side of things. I did just wonder whether it would be helpful just for Gerard just to show the slide again, so that members can be clear on what the details are that are presented in front of them today.
Thank you. Yes.
And we can just recap on whether there is enough information for members to make that decision. Is that okay, Gerard?
That sounds like a good idea to me. So while Gerard's putting that up, the two decisions this committee can make are to discharge the conditions or not discharge them. We can defer and ask for more information if we wish, but we'd have to be clear why we were doing that, in my opinion.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just rather than go through the presentation again in its entirety, I'm just pulling the slides up to allow members to look at each of them in turn. Okay, that's an illustrative refuse store. And remember that this would have refuse bins contained within it. That's the plan and elevation. And you have the window details, the front boundary railings, the light well railings, and an illustrative photograph. And those are the details that are before you.
Thank you very much. I believe our legal advisor wanted to come in again.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just really wanted to make it clear that the applicant has applied to discharge this particular condition. So therefore, members tonight, if they really do think that the information is insufficient, then the condition will not be discharged. However, if they do think that there's sufficient information there that's been presented to them tonight and within the officer's report, then the condition is discharged. It's either one or the other.
Yes, that's my understanding. Sorry, I wasn't very clear. If we agree not to discharge it, could whoever's got their phone ringing please mute themselves? Thank you. If we were to decide not to discharge this, I think we would essentially say that, to paraphrase Councillor Lynch, if we said we weren't discharging it, they would be welcome to bring it back. And we could indicate that we would like it to be brought back with photographs of the actual site rather than the illustrative photographs. That's probably a better way of putting what I was trying to say. So thank you very much to the legal advisor. So Councillor Lynch, I'm going to take Councillor Lynch's proposal and see what people think of that. Oh, Natalie wishes to come in again. You're on mute.
Sorry, also struggling with the legacy hand as well, Councillor Hanson. Yeah, just to reiterate that what's on site is not necessarily what's proposed, depending on what the outcome of the investigation, any investigations are. I don't, did Luciana want to come in? I thought I saw her hand up.
No, I just wanted to clarify that, well, I was going to say what you said, Natalie, that it's important to highlight that what we're considering here are the drawings in front of us. In terms of the windows, they are double glazed 16 millimeters, double glazed units. They're timber framed according to the drawings. We have sufficient information on the drawings to make an assessment that they are of acceptable detail. Whether they have been implemented to what is indicated on the drawings is another method that enforcement could then investigate. In terms of the bin storage and the cycle storage, the same for us. We consider that the 1.2 max height indicated for the bicycle storage is acceptable. They have indicated that it would be brickwork with a sedum roof, which was something that we negotiated to ensure that there was the impact of that bicycle storage would be mitigated. And it's, if you look on the street, it's very characteristic to have low boundary walls to that approximate height. Again, the drawings, what the drawings indicate, we consider to be sufficient in terms of the information and acceptable and satisfactory in terms of the impact on the conservation area and the appearance. Now, whether that has been implemented in accordance to those drawings is another method that the enforcement could then investigate. If it hasn't been done in accordance, then could enforce that. I just wanted to clarify that we are satisfied that the drawings provide sufficient information in terms of the quality of the proposed details, and we consider them to be satisfactory.
I can see some other hands. I can see Councillor Levy and John Sang. The objectors have their hands raised. Just to clarify again, the objectors can only answer questions from members of the committee. You don't have further speaking rights unless a question is put to you, I'm afraid. So I'm going to take John Sang first, if that's okay.
Chair, I believe that Councillor Levy had his hand raised
Good.
first.
I've seen him. Okay. But I was calling John first to give his professional advice, and then I will take Councillor Levy, because I assumed he wanted to follow on from his from the other officers.
Of course, Chair. Okay.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just going to point out the comments made by Luciana and Natalie already. So enforcement will investigate matters where what's shown in the approval details are different to what's being built out. But secondly, if members are progressing with potentially a decision regarding a lack of information, I can confirm that in most circumstances, details of bin stores and cycle stores are contained within elevations, sections and plans exactly as set out and what's been submitted by the applicant here.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say there is no requirement per se for a photograph of the site to be submitted, to my knowledge. And so I think the photographs that Jared has clarified that the photographs we've been sent are to illustrate the type of thing we're talking about rather than saying they are of the site. Right, Councillor Levy, please.
Thank you, Chair. And this is for comment purposes only, really, because we've gone through this. But I just, I'd like to reiterate that I've sat on this committee for many years, and I'm always uncomfortable when we ask to discharge conditions from submitted drawings where objectors state they're not being complied with. But I'm being asked to determine only what is being put before us this evening, and I rely entirely on the probity of the officer's report, and I have no reason to doubt it. On the other hand, of course, I know that we have an absolutely robust enforcement department, and if they need to step in, they will do. I'm just looking at the agenda item before us, and that's exactly what it is that I will vote on. Thank you.
Thank you, which brings us to the vote. So the recommendation is that we approve the details. If people think they haven't got sufficient information, they can vote not to approve. But we are only approving the details on the basis of the drawings that are before us. We are not considering enforcement matters. They are not material to tonight's decision. Councillor Bell.
Chair, I think it's a matter of we asked it to be brought back specifically to address the details. That was exactly why we brought it back. It wasn't to have a representative drawing. I understand there are plenty of cases where it may be appropriate to use representative drawing or photograph in a report, but when we ask for a detailed report to come back, we need detail and need to be accurate detail we can actually be certain is true in this case. So I think we haven't had it in this case, so I will be voting to defer this.
I think technically you're not voting to defer, you're voting not to approve, but I take your point.
I'd like to move to defer the item.
Okay, I think technically we would have to, rather than to defer, we'd have to vote not to approve, and we'd have to say that the reason we are not approving is because we want other images, drawings and so on. But before I take a vote on that proposal, I'll call the legal advisor.
Yeah, basically what you are voting on tonight to say either the application is discharged or it's not discharged, and that is it.
Okay, so were the committee to vote not to discharge, I would imagine we could ask for the minutes to say, to record the reasons people gave for that vote, which would then give an indication to the applicant and the officers of what would constitute an acceptable resubmission.
Correct. Thank you, Chair.
That's fine, as long as we're following the legal procedures. So it's been moved and seconded that we don't discharge. So, but actually, given it's a two-way vote, I'm going to call the vote for the officer's recommendation and against the officer's recommendation. If you are against the officer's recommendation, as Councillor Lynch and Councillor Bell have already indicated, then your vote is against this recommendation. Is everyone clear what we're voting on? So may I?
Apologies, Chair. Just to clarify then, are you going to first ask then councillors to the vote for? Is that, have I heard you correctly?
Yes. I'm going
Thank
to
you.
call the vote on the officer's recommendation in the
Thank you
normal
very
way.
much, Chair. Thank you.
2 members have already indicated they intend to vote against. So I was just clarifying that rather than take a vote on the proposal to defer, which was what was proposed, the correct form of this vote, as advised by the legal advisor, is a vote for the officer's recommendation, which is a vote to discharge, or a vote against the officer's recommendation, which is a vote not to discharge. And then if more people are against than in favour, I will ask people to state their reasons, and those reasons can then be recorded. So is everyone clear what we're voting on? Excellent. In that case, may I please see those in favour of the officer's recommendation on a hand vote first? Show of hands in your camera. That is 1, 2, 3, 4. May I please see those against? That is 2. So the details are approved. So I won't ask for reasons to be recorded in the minutes for that because it's been approved. Is everyone clear why that's the case?
Chair, would you want to do a roll call on the vote?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Gareth, could you please do a roll call for me?
Okay. So could I have a vote, please? Well, I'll go. So apologies. Sorry. It's the end of the meeting. Could I have your vote, please, Councillor
For.
Johnson, for the recommendation? Thank you very much. Councillor Levy, could I have your vote, please, for the recommendation?
For.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lynch, could I have, please, your vote for the recommendation, please?
Against.
Thank you very much. Councillor Snell, could I please have your vote, please, for the recommendation?
Usually I abstained on this one.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying. Councillor Bell, I know you've indicated already, but just for, again, could you indicate, please, your vote?
Against.
Thank you very much. And finally, not finally, Councillor Race, please, your vote.
For, thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, Councillor Chowhan, could you please indicate your vote, please?
For.
Thank you very much. That concludes the voting process for this application.
Thank you, Gareth. So the last item on the agenda is the delegated decisions, which are always reported to the committee. And I do recommend to committee members that you look through them. They are informative in their own way. Do we note the delegated decisions?
Noted.
Noted.
Is noted.
Thank you very much.
Is there any other business officers that we have to consider? No, in that case, thank you all very much indeed for your attendance.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, the members of staff.
Bye.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson.